thank you. We are loaded in, though, to 2,000 atmospheres, the most popular map ever made. In the top right, we have the blue Zerg player representing Dragon Phoenix Gaming. He is Dark.
And to the bottom left is the red Terran. We have Team NV's Maru. Another interesting fact here, Nathanias, that doesn't have to do with goats.
Hit me.
Unless you consider these guys.
If I could not hear about goats for the rest of my life, other than Cyril, of course, I would love to. So
okay.
Let's go.
Well, then this is not goat related, so there you have it. These are both the players that came in from the GSL play-ins. They actually did not make it to the round of 4 in GSL. So they had to battle it out. Dark more so than Maru. Dark had to beat Dream, was it? And then Maru got a victory over Parting, who unfortunately couldn't attend. So these guys actually might not have been here in another world. How does that... It's so crazy.
It's crazy.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah. That is kind of wild. Although... It's wild because we look at these players, we look at this matchup, and we're like, okay, well, we don't need to do any fake hype. We don't have to worry about selling this one. We've got two of the best of the best. And I can't see a world, especially as we've mentioned, they're both in Korea, so latency is off the table. I can't imagine a world where this doesn't turn into a banger series no matter what, right?
It should, but then I guess people were saying that about the GSL finals.
Oof. Well, let's just hope that Maru doesn't forget that roaches exist, you know?
I really hope not.
I feel like as long as you don't assume the other player is going to do the most boring standard strategy, then you should be aware enough to be okay. But I guess I felt that same way during the aforementioned GSL finals. So.
Exactly, yeah. Thing is, I guess Rogue maybe isn't as well known for being a Roach player, although now a little more so. But Dark has always been, so we hope that Maru doesn't forget. We do have a little bit of that harassment early on. Dark was looking for a 2-racks with a drone earlier on, as that is something Maru is known for. But lately, Maru's known more so for putting 2-racks back at home, doing some 2-1-1s, bringing us back to 3 or 4 years ago, but making it look really good yet still.
Yeah, I feel like everybody talked about how they're like, oh yeah, Zerg's kind of figured this build out. It's not as good as it used to be. You just build like 6 queens or whatever. But I don't know that I ever actually believed that. Like, I can see why people would try to mix it up for the purpose of hiding what they're doing. But bringing it back in the way that it has been, yeah, this is just how meta works. If you have less, if people are doing it less, then the other players don't have as much practice against it. They get a little more dull, you know? It's... It just kind of seems like the natural ebb and flow of strategy. Of course, we had to come back here one day, just like people trying to do those terrible Hellbat pushes.
One day they'll work again, apparently.
One day people will hopefully just stop ever building Hellbats.
Or that.
We'll see how long it takes for the message to get through on that.
Yeah. Legit, it does have 2 things going for it, the 2-1-1. First and foremost, I usually have to talk about it with Beyond, because he still does it as well. That generally, the idea is there, right? A little bit of pressure, a little bit of harassment, should get away pretty okay. And then you can choose a macro build or a bit more of a dedicated 2-base build, which has also been making kind of a comeback, but I really would not like to see it in general, especially against Dark. And the other thing is that there's a couple more builds that actually have Marines as an opener. So this was one of the downsides from the get-go of this build. That was very, very, very obvious what you were doing. As soon as you saw more than 1, definitely more than 3 Marines, just no Hellions, they're like, oh, it's a 2-1-1. All right, 8 Queens, put them in position. And it was just way too easy. But now you have a lot of builds. Maru's been throwing out some. We got some mass barracks builds coming back. We have some Hellbat additions, which, again, maybe not the best, but it is included. But if you don't do any of that, goes back to the first point. It is a little bit of pressure, a little bit of scouting, a little bit of harassment, and we know that Maru should be able to keep all 16 Marines alive for an extended period of time, especially now that we're on the Korean server.
Exactly. And we do have Roaches coming out for Dark as he's going to prepare to defend. I mean, it's not exactly going to be any sort of timing for him. The lair is almost done, but Roach speed is a distant dream. There's not really a whole lot else that could complement these, so I feel like going and digging into Ravagers is not really an option either. You're just going to try and defend, hold this off. And sometimes the Terran player will do this little poke. They won't force it. You wait for the next set of medevacs or whatnot to come in, and you can reinforce and say, okay, well, you built all these Roaches now, but maybe you needed a little more money to build more Roaches for a minute down the line. And this is about what we expect here, as he's able to get towards the front, push these Marines away, and you just kind of chill. I feel like not throwing these forces away is a big one. And as far as the 2-on-1 thing goes, Zergs aren't all playing like True anymore either, where you have people just YOLOing crazy amounts of Zerglings in at the start of every game. So you don't necessarily have to have Hellions at the beginning of every TVZ either.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The Hellions still do provide all of that, plus a couple more options as well behind the build, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a best of 5 what Hellion openers can be.
Yeah, and we'll definitely
do it all.
We'll definitely get at least a few.
Yeah.
My mind would be blown if Maru was just straight up like, no, I'm going to 2-1-1 all 5 games.
Yeah, but to your point, not only is no one playing like True anymore, Dark is not really likely to play any kind of Ling emphasis style. I do think he will at least one, definitely 2 games is my opinion. We'll see a couple of Ling-based styles out from Dark. But yeah, he's known for liking roaches, so that's what we're seeing here. There's always a little bit of a tempting position for the first 2 medevac drops if the roach player has made just too few on those roaches, but that wasn't the case. Actually, Maru got pushed back very quickly and so far hasn't done any damage. Now, direct damage with this build isn't really likely, so we're usually talking about finding a queen or a handful of creep tumors. But even that hasn't really happened so far. That's a little bit worrying for the overall build, even though Maru does set down his 3rd CC and still has these medevacs roaming around. At some point, it will become a question more so of how much has Maru done, and instead, how much is Dark going to do with a potential 1-1 attack?
Yeah, I think the biggest things to keep in mind are if he had, if you go for any sort of Hellion opener and try to transition into regular bio, things like this 1-1 end up being a bit later.
Oh.
We have a Nidus network coming in for Dark, but just to quickly finish, obviously the roaches can be good against those, and if you don't have a lot of bio, it is really difficult to deal with these attacks. If you're up against a 1-1 speed roach timing, even with a smattering of Ravagers, and your 1-1 is like 75% done or not, if it's not completely finished, it's really, really hard to hold those pushes, especially on the 3rd base where it's a little bit more open, you can spread out a little bit more, or obviously a Nidus worm, well, it could be anywhere.
Yeah, this is going to be a little more of a twist. Maru is probably very much expecting this style and this build. The other downside we see other Terrans make with their openers is sometimes they're really gung-ho about Widow Mines, right? Maru definitely not even bothering with that. He's like, no, it's going to be roaches. Oh, there's the roaches. Let's just build tanks. So even though he's only on 1 factory, he's building quite a few. But the Nidus Worm is that additional problem that I'm not sure Maru was considering. I know Dark has done this occasionally, but it's not 100%. And this could really throw him off. It also could be handled super easily, like no problem, main base covered by a single Marauder. But that remains to be seen. The attack is on the way. The Nidus Worm is getting set up here. Is Maru too distracted by the front?
He's trying to focus on, as you were saying, that front line. Biles hit a few of those units. Their units out of the barracks immediately sprint over, so good denial on the first worm for Maru as he's able to buy himself time. The second one will go out towards the front of that 3rd base, but it's such a scary situation. No matter how good you are, facing a maxed out Roach Ravager army at the 8-minute mark and having held for 40 seconds now, Maru still has a lot of pressure on him. If those Biles are able to hit, we know they can do a tremendous amount of damage. They'll one-shot any Marines that they come into contact with. So keeping those siege tanks alive is paramount for chances at victory.
This seems like such a lockdown Terran base. I mean, even the factory, it can look vulnerable. It's actually providing a little bit of that Sim City. 1 tank doesn't even go down. Corrosive Bile missed. The factory does fall. And considering that Dark is transitioning, he's moving on a little bit here, I guess that is something. But the attack hasn't worked out as far as a dedicated attack goes. He's not in the best position for a Zerg player. And the Nidus Worm specifically has not worked out so far. I know he's using it to get some speedy reinforcements, but these trades have not even been tempting. There's not even that snowball effect as that 1 tank even got repaired up.
Yeah, he's done a good job of dealing with the worms for sure. We saw earlier there were a little bit of bio units left inside the main base. That Overseer's still there, so on the table forever, but tries to come in straight up on the 3rd. Biles down one of the siege tanks, and we can see as that bio count rises, getting into the head-to-head fight, they really rip the Roach Ravager apart. Side note, of course, the creep spread's made a nice journey down towards that base. The worm helps to spread that and gives a little bit of that mobility. He'll come out and grab this one on the right. And Maru, thus far, I think he's done just about everything that you need to do in this situation. Roach Ravager falls off really hard as the Terran gets over that 160 mark of supply. Trying to take a maxed out fight against 2-2 Marine Marauder would be just a fool's gambit. So you're almost now trying to just keep Maru contained so you can get the hive up, get maybe those Vipers, disable the tanks, blinding cloud on the bio so that they're forced to come in a little bit closer to those roaches and can't kite. A nice action-packed start to this series.
it's actually kind of a cool start, right? Because I think what we see here is just two players who do know each other almost too well. So not much has happened. Dark is, I think, maybe a little more eager to actually make something work, as we see from his perhaps over-eager attempts to break down the bio. I guess he saw no tanks, there are not many, and was like, oh, I can do this, right? And it's like, no, 2-2. With that many Marauders, still a lot of Medivacs healing as well. Rips through about half of these Ravagers, sends them packing back home. And Dark is in a position where he can recover from this and the previous fight, but every single time it goes poorly like that, every single time that Maru gets closer to another base, more big upgrade, 3-3 right, then Dark's in a lot of trouble, but that's why he's getting 2 Infestors and a Hive. Still threatening with this Nidus Swarm as well. This one is again shut down, but it's one of those things where I think Dark is... He wants to do something more than Maru, who is really just trying to play a perfect defensive game and then worry about getting on the map a little bit later.
And it makes sense, you know, especially with the threat of the Nidus Worm. It takes a bit of time for that worm to tunnel, but when you're playing Bio, the production cycle of the Marine Marauder is very short, so it's not that hard for units to just pop out and kill it unless he's supply blocked or maxed out and out on the map. So Maru's done a good job of dealing with that, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of the way that Showtime game went, where Showtime was constantly in his face, trying to force him into a bad fight. And we know Maru, he is more than fine with just sitting back, bleeding the enemy out and saying, hey, if you want to burn an extra 10,000 resources of Roach Ravager trying to kill me, go for it.
Yeah, and it's already 4,000 resource difference. A lot of gas has been lost by Dark with all the Ravagers that's gone down with a couple of these engagements. But that's what Maru, he shows that he's willing to play any and all styles. I guess maybe not so much mech, but we actually did even see that in DreamHack Summer. So yeah, you can give a nod to him for maybe bringing that out in this series or another one. But anyways, back to this specific game. Bio now trying to get to that 3-3. Actually, he's timed out even pacing with Dark's 3-3. Dark also added on a couple of those Infestors. Maru tries to pre-split, making sure he doesn't get the Wombo combo Fungal and Corrosive Bile on too much at the very least, but I am a little surprised. Maru standing his ground as long as he possibly can. Finally, Dark's reinforcements come forward, but Maru's also got reinforcements. A lot of these Marauders still alive from the beginning fight there, and they're just kind of trying to continue on. Maru actually really wants this position.
Yeah, the crazy thing about these types of fights is the longer the fight goes, it does slowly get better for the Terran. The Medivacs kind of run out of energy, but the Infestors, at the start of the fight, you know, if you have that period of time to build up, they're going to have those fungals available. But if you can weather the storm and keep battling, then the Infestors just have to wait. And they're totally dead supply through the majority of the fight until they get enough energy to drop those extra fungals. And I actually really like the Widowmine usage. You know, Dark's killed a few of them, but we've still had quite a lot of pot shots going against this Ravager ball, and it's made things very awkward. It makes it hard to chase this type of army, and as he goes into Ghosts, well, we know that Snipe is going to one-shot every single unit that Dark could have, as long as he's able to land those shots, of course, as Fat Fungal lands on a few of them.
This is kind of an interesting fight. It lasted so much longer than you would expect, especially with the type of armies that were available. Well, specifically the Terran's army. It wasn't 6 tanks sieging up and saying, okay, do or die here. It was Widowmines, which are a little more, you're okay if you lose them. You can move away from them. You can pick them up and move them somewhere else. They're as mobile as the rest of the army, basically. A little slower now that Ghosts have been included. But Maru decided to add this on. He's taken away all of that Ling fodder that Dark was going to add on to the army, and even brings in the Ghost to get the snipes, maybe even an EMP or two. Eventually, Dark is going to go into Lurkers, though, and I'm wondering if Maru, just goes back into tanks, or just does the both of them, because it seems to be working out. More snipes coming down as the Corrosive Biles also try to do something, but find really not a whole lot. Dark, perhaps even also surprised at how much Maru is pushing into him, is starting to run a little bit low on that bank, while also losing out on the supply. He's trying to add on those Hydras, but they're not going to be here yet. They're going to be Lurkers, that's for sure, for a little while longer. And Maru just looking to win steadily but surely.
I love that. Takes
game 1 after an elongated battle around the Xel'Naga. That must have lasted 3 minutes.
That's one of the coolest fights I think we've had in a TVZ in a while, and it's a really interesting thing that he baits a tremendous amount of the Biles with the Widowmines. Could he have tried to use tanks? Sure, but they cost so much more resources. They take longer to build. You have to siege them, and he's willing to say, look, the Widow Mines cost less than the Marauders. If I'm putting a few of them here and there and you're dropping 2 biles on each of them at the start of every one of these engagements, you're taking a huge amount of firepower out. And the best case scenario, which did happen several times, a few of those mines were able to get multiple hits off. And it turned it into a really weird battle because we had all those infestors doing nothing. Because he's like, as long as the fight doesn't stop, you don't get any time to rebuild the energy on those.
Yeah, I really feel like Dark is so used to a Terran sticking around for a little bit, especially if the fight's not going that poorly, but for as long as he did, again, without those very much so more stationary tanks or Liberators, for instance, right? The siege units weren't really there. That's not what Widow Mines are called, but they were so effective in what they were able to add to the rest of the bio army. And that was just a really cool play from Maru, because it feels like this is him proving that he doesn't have a weakness to roaches, right? Which is kind of a big question after the GSL finals. And he's had plenty of TVZs afterwards, guys. I know it's not right here, right now. Maru was looking good versus Zerg. He's looked good versus Zerg. Asus Rogue was actually a huge contributor to that. But it shows so much more maturity, I guess, than I expected, and ease in this game against what Dark was throwing at him as well. Overall, 15, 16-minute game, right? Sounds like it was pretty back and forth, but you really look at all of it together, and it's like, no, actually, Maru was just on top of everything. He was the better player.
Yeah, the coolest part of that game was just when the Ghost came in and he was doing a really good job of controlling them. But since it's not a Ling Bane based army, the risk of getting chased is very minimal. He still had, of course, the Widow Mines, and he wasn't that far from his own base. He's like, if you just have Roach Ravager, I'll just pew 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 pew. And any time that he even tried to poke or come up or land those biles, units were just getting shaved off. And those, it's kind of like the infestors, except when they're out of energy, the Ghost can still shoot.
Still a little bit useful at the very least. It's an interesting dynamic we'll go into a little bit more after the introductions as we get into game 2. Curious Minds in the bottom right, getting that last map victory. He is Team Envy's Maru.
He currently leads over our Blue Zerg in the northwest. Representing Dragon Phoenix Gaming, he is Doc.
Yeah, thinking about how often a Roach Ravager fungal army is going to try to evacuate, spit over a couple of spells, and then just run away. And Ghosts are just, they're the adults saying, no, you can't do that. You just can't do that over and over again. Now, they're expensive. Like, if that doesn't work, if you do still get overwhelmed, then maybe Ghosts aren't the easiest thing at the very least to add in, but we're talking about this level of TVZ. It's not what's easy, it's what's good, and Maru was able to add in very good units in that scenario and use them very well.
It's one of those things that is just, we see how units operate in their normal situation. Like, Ravagers are good because you can drop the biles while someone's kiting you and hit them, and you can keep running your units away, right? And they're also great at sieging. But when they're in a defensive place, where it's like, I need to hold this tower because one of my expansions is here, and you're forced to fight, and you can't just keep running. The Ghost at 10 range is how far they can lock on to you for the snipe. And if it hits the Ravager, it's going to die. So you don't have that ability to throw a couple Banes and try to cancel. The energy from the Infestors is already gone because, as you said, that fight lasted 3.5 minutes. It's not like he can just keep throwing fungals nonstop the whole time.
No, he could not. We've given a lot of credit to Maru, and he did win that game, so credit is due. But I guess talk a little bit about Dark's perspective there, right? He did do a fairly big committal to 1-1. Sometimes we do see these Zerg players either fake, they want to go roaches, they don't actually want to do the 1-1 attack, so we'll call that a bit of a fake sometimes, and then they'll just macro out of it. Sometimes we see them very quickly realize, oh, this isn't going to work, let's move on. Dark was like a little big, he was committed, he did eventually move on, wasn't the quickest, wasn't the slowest either. But he also really wanted to do some damage and keep Maru under his thumb. Didn't ever really seem to work. Maru was actually adding on Marauders even from his 3-barrack scenario, something he didn't really get to add in. But usually you see against Roaches, 3 barracks and 5 barracks, right? And then you see some Marauder being pumped, and even some Terrans are going like all Marine. But Maru actually was adding in Marauders from the get-go, again adding on those tanks super fast. He was just so well set up against what Dark was doing. And then for Dark to actually hold that Xel'Naga, because again, we're giving a lot of credit to Maru for doing that, what he did, handling the situation for a good 3.5 minutes. I wonder if Dark really should have just pulled back. Like, I know he was in a bit of a tricky spot because he dedicated to this thing and he was in the midst of transitioning, but I thought that maybe pulling back to his base or even giving it up in the hopes of managing to get those 10 lurkers may have been better. I know some Terrans have been grumbling a little bit, I suppose, about lurkers and how good they are, especially in comeback positions. But no, Dark, he didn't want to get there, apparently. And maybe he should have. Maybe he'll play this game, I guess, a little more to the point of getting to the lurkers as opposed to really forcing the issue with Roach Ravager.
It's such a difficult position to be in for the Zerg there because Maru refused to take his foot off the gas pedal. And even Cyril, in his interview yesterday, was saying about that series with Maru that it was, he was a little too passive. So I expected him to try and play a little more aggressively maybe, or I guess for Cyril, he's like, well, maybe he should have played more aggressively, but he knew he was going to play passive or whatever it was. But because of that, the lurkers, I'm not going to say that they're bad, but it takes forever to get those upgrades. Hellion's going to run straight into the natural of Dark's. Got 3 drones so far. Little barbecue to start off your Sunday afternoon. And going into that main base, sees, okay, we got a hatch. No Baneling Nest, no Roach Warren, no early lair. Okay, this seems like a pretty straightforward game. I don't have anything funky that I need to worry about except for the fact that these lings, well, the spawning pool isn't exactly jiggling, and those Zerglings weren't moving very fast, were they, Zombie Grub?
He did see the Roach Warren in the natural, I think.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. He got far back there. So I think that was, Maru being like, well, those are slow lings. Not that many of them. I'm going to force the issue. And then he also gets the scout to confirm probably was already suspecting with the very, very, very late and, of course, non-existent ling speed. So that's a nice confirmation for Maru, who does probably add on this, I call it a safety Banshee because of that scout. Otherwise, he might have been planning on going Viking, Stim, maybe Liberator thrown in there too, right? But the Banshee is far more dependable if roaches are going to come across the map. Now, Dark knows he's been scouted, so that's a little bit awkward. Not even going to try and go across the map with very much. Just makes a few roaches to have something to help his defense, because then those speedlings to depend on.
Yeah, I mean, when you kill even just a couple of drones like that, especially if you know that the Zerg is going into roaches, losing the Hellions it's not really a problem. They're not very good against these types of armies. I mean, of course, with Great Micro, you can do a lot against lings, but that's not what Dark is going to rely on in this series from what we've seen. So I could not agree with you more. And he had to be feeling fine making this investment into the Banshee. Not only does he get a little bit of map presence, but he had that 3rd command center done a very long time ago, as all Terrans do try to get. So it's not like money is going to be an issue for our Korean Terran in this series.
That's such a non-committal to factory production of those Hellions. Just 6, which is, the bare bones. And, had he known it was roaches immediately, maybe he doesn't even get the 5th and the 6th, but still not very long there. Doesn't spend any time, again, wasting time on Widow Mines. Goes right into the tank. He knows it's roaches. He's also probably figuring it's not going to be a fake, knowing Dark. He actually is going to continue building roaches, so right into the tanks. I will say this map's a bit different, right? This map has that wide open area in a lot of places, in fact, which means that the SimCity that worked out so well on 2,000 atmospheres might not work out as well here. Maybe Dark could still have a fairly powerful 1-1 attack, more powerful, more carnage, more chaos at the very least than last game. But with how much Dark has just been on his toes, like I really wonder.
Too Furious, the sequel.
It is going to be very similar, and I just wonder if how is this going to go better for Dark?
No, you make an excellent point, and this I think is one of the reasons why we kind of always fall into this trap of talking about that triangle base on Blackburn. If the rocks get destroyed, you have a huge angle, you have a massive wide arc. There's no slow zones here, so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. If Maru overextends, then there is no way to funnel the roaches through. The siege tanks will be a lot less useful, so he needs to make sure that everything he's doing is just cautious enough. Of course, if you can keep Dark inside of his own base, then you're not as worried about getting attacked, but look how far back the siege tanks are tucked, right? You don't want to put them towards the front because you know how vulnerable that point is. You want to bring them closer. You want to be able to at least make it hard to get the vision to bile them down.
Right, and it would be very difficult to get that. This is a bit of an underreaction from Dark, I think, that has turned into a big problem. He thought maybe with 3 queens in the main and a couple of spore crawlers, he'd be all right. And no, not necessarily. Loses a lot of queens, a lot of lost mining time. 1 medevac does get away as well. Perhaps not the biggest of deals, but again, just the fact that his roaches, maybe could have gotten there faster had he been more scared or a little late to the party. But Maru is still feeling nice about that. It was very not a heavy drop from him, right? Still has so much going on back home. Now a little bit of SimCity, even with a very healthy 4th command center, now adds the SimCity as opposed to being a weak point if it's only 20-30% done. I mean, Maru, again, I just think he really knows what Dark is going to try and do here. And he's also well aware that Dark's going to try and transition at the exact right moments. But Maru, evaluating this, is after going to pull the SCVs, brings one of the tanks back, realizing that the front line is not going to hold. Command Center is not finished, and that might be the easy cancel that Dark can at least walk away with. Yeah, it finishes, and then has to be canceled immediately at that almost 100%. So Maru, even he, I guess, was not super confident with the positioning the map gave him. He was like, you know what? It's too wide of a concave. Let's pull everything back. He still loses a lot for it.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were just talking about. This map, you have just that huge open area by the third base. It gives Dark a chance to strike back in a big way, pick off 16 SCVs. I mean, Maru still has 67 plus mules, so not super worried there. I think that the only cause for concern becomes losing the 4th command center, because now Dark is going to keep putting this pressure on. There's no other base to try to attack or harass, so you just hold this point. And perhaps even more importantly is he's done a good job of pushing that creep spread forward too. So his opportunity to reset and get everything back, or even if he just needs to run home, is it's very simple for him. And there you go. He's just in this standoff. He's like, yeah, go for it, bro. All your tanks are in your natural. I know that a bunch of Marines and SCVs aren't going to kill this. I'm maxed out. And now he can much more comfortably not only get those 2-2 upgrades, but move up to the Hive as the Infestation Pit is halfway done.
Maru is very close to having another defense to really defend the third base. So his 2-2's finishing. His tank count's growing now 2 at a time. Medevac's, again, mostly going to live through these fights. So I think he's close to being able to truly saturate his third base again. But 4th base canceled. And then his 3rd has not been mining for a good 2 minutes. It looks like Dark's going to try again, just as 2-2, at least +2 attack finishes for Maru. Maybe a little bit of an anti-timing there for Dark, who also ran again into the building tank counts, and Maru's not going to let this one go. He's like, no, you made a mistake. I am due a couple of more Ravagers before I get out of here, if he even has to. Now he stands his ground, cleans up a couple of those creep tumors, and then goes back to saturate his 3rd CC.
Yeah, and it's a very good move. He kind of takes the SCVs forward, lets like 4 of them die, pull a bit of aggro, then just sends those guys off to mine while the command center lands. And I think you said it best, right? His 2-2's done now, about 30 seconds after the fight.
Yeah.
So not necessarily the best place to be. Still has a lot of roaches and ravagers. We saw a couple of lings getting mixed into this now. That hive we were talking about is coming in. So he is trying to keep Maru's economy limited so that he can't make that big parade push of bio while transitioning into the ghosts.
I would not at all be surprised if Dark clicked on a unit and saw 1-1. And, you know, he doesn't know how close to +2 is finishing. If that even was their determining factor, Dark is once again going to jump on top of these tanks. Lots of corrosive biles running down onto not a whole lot. Pretty good split there at the last second from Maru. And again, the hold is true. But this time around, I think Dark can be really satisfied with how this game went. More so than last game, that's for sure. Things have actually happened. He's actually hurt Maru's economy. He's hurt his bio count a little bit. And he's on his way to Hive, Lurkers, without that pressure that he had last game. He also has a lot of bases, a lot of creep spread. So many more things are going well for Dark that I think this is the game that he wants, right? It's not necessarily about winning with the 1-1 push, although that's always nice. It's about doing that damage and still being in control of the game as he goes into Lurkers, which hopefully then is the kill move. We know that Maru, he's pretty good against it. And even though he took his beatings this time around, he got the 4th base up pretty quickly after his 3rd. He's almost maxed out with 3-3 on the way. Just I think the the ghost timing is going to be a little more difficult for him, and he's not going to have that pressure in the middle point of the map.
The Banshee finally sings its swan song as the Ravagers bile it down. But I think you make a couple of excellent points, Zombie Grub. And perhaps the biggest part of all of this for Dark is, at the start of this game, Maru was throwing a couple of punches here and there, grabbed that queen, the Overlord, some drones. But for the last couple of minutes, the very aggressive Terran that we know for loving to get out on the map and bring that pressure, he's been stuck on his half of the field. Has not been able to put pressure on Dark. He has not been able to get across and pick off any of these peripheral expansions, deny upgrades, or even just force him to not spend money on leveling that tech. So Maru being kept back and kind of shepherded in has definitely worked to the favor of Dark. And like you were saying, if he's given enough time, even if he goes for ghosts, we know that the Lurkers, they can play ball against the ghosts now. They can cancel those snipes. They have the same range. So it's not necessarily this binary thing of, okay, once I get the ghosts out, I can just snipe everything. No, we're going to be in that next stage of the game for the Zerg as well.
Absolutely. See how both of them got to change up their game plan a little bit. Dark also didn't really spend any time on Infestors, right to the Vipers, right to building a couple of Lurkers. Not a whole lot right now, though, so Maru's push is still actually very scary. He's going to have 3-3 as well very soon. Dark actually going to send some units across the map to hopefully buy some time, do some damage, but also allow him to have some room to build more of these Hydras, more of these Lurkers. But unfortunately, he did not get to stop this push from Maru. Not before it takes down a base, and might even be looking for one more. Abducts do come in on some very good units there, but yeah, the base is gone, the drones are gone, and Maru didn't take a whole lot of damage back home.
No, solid defense back home. I think a tank got grabbed that was trying to rally out, but the Liberator was there. Helped a little bit, keeping that planetary safe from the roaches. And he's just going to keep forcing the issue. I'm not sure if he's able to get the target fire on the Lurker itself. I believe he got maybe one of them, but there's still at least one cheeky one in there. 10 Lurkers are morphing right now. He has adaptive talents. I actually don't know if he got seismic spines before that. So if he doesn't have that range upgrade, that's also something that can really come back to bite Dark in the butt.
He doesn't have the range. He only has one of the upgrades. So this is I think this was the perfect timing for Maru. He did just good enough against all the pushes to be able to do a push of his own, hitting at that right time, getting to that very abusive position. Now Dark is okay. If he had 8 Lurkers and those 2 Vipers at this point of the Terran army, then he's probably totally fine. But Maru already got the damage, realizes he might be overstaying his welcome, pulls back, so plenty of army to defend what is now a very scary number of Lurkers, although they still need their second upgrade. There it is, finally started. Dark really wants to get some revenge. He doesn't like that he took that much damage, even though he's on his way to recovery, and he wants to start doing some damage before the ghosts are out. As you said, it's not binary. It's not that one count as the other. It's just there's actually a lot more to play with back and forth when we get to this point, and it seems like we have gotten to a point where it's actually a bit Maru favored, but certainly a lot of game left to play.
Yeah, and at least until we reach that point where Seismic Spines is done, the Ghost Snipe will outrange the Lurkers. So getting caught in an awkward spot could spell disaster. But that's also why we saw those Ravagers poking him as much as we did earlier. Limit the ability for him to make those investments. We won't have a crazy amount of ghosts out, and that range upgrade is done. So this is where things start to get tricky. One of the things I do like, Maru squeezed a couple of Vikings out a bit earlier in that engagement, just to kind of bully those Vipers away. It's not like there are Corruptors or Broodlords or Mutalisks or anything like that. And some Zerg is gonna clip that and put it on a loop on his like animated photo thing on his mantle. Like I can tell you, that's a beautiful image right there.
That was really good, really. That was like 3 medevacs of units, I think. But Maru does still have, more importantly, the expensive units back at home. Gets a nice EMP as well, even the little animations of the ghost chirping a little bit there. But he's going to be able to repel that. So with the severe loss of bio up to the top right, only losing a Lurker there. And Dark having reestablished a couple of mining bases and now getting his top right base as well, does feel like things have truly evened out. Usually you want the Zerg to have more of a bank, but we're also usually more so on that when it's a Ling-Baneling composition, right? Because it's so sacrificial. When it's with Lurkers, you know, the idea here, the ideal for Dark is that these are actually cost-effective units, so he doesn't necessarily have to keep replacing them. He shouldn't have to. So when he gets up to 14 and 5 more on the way, the 19 Lurkers, hopefully those are the 19 Lurkers for the next 5 or 6 minutes, and hopefully he wins with them.
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about where Dark gets his strength, he's not in a bad spot, but he's still investing into what he has right now, because it's been a crazy game. He's been a little bit all over the place, and giving himself the option down the line to make a move into something like, you know, Greater Spire, get Broodlords, at least have that tech transition if it goes a little too heavy-handed in one way or the other. That's where the strength of Zerg comes in, and we talk about those late game powerhouses. So he's doing a good amount of work, but we're just now getting that Baneling nest coming in. We're just now getting the +2 melee. I'd love to see Adrenal Glands if he hasn't already started that, because as long as he keeps leaning into this heavy bio push and is able to trade against the Lurkers, it's going to be a little bit tricky if Dark can't catch him with anything else. So this bio will be forced to pick up, but most of it escapes. And I think as long as he just keeps bleeding out a couple Lurkers here and there, it's going to be very hard for Dark to actually move forward with them, because he is keeping them spread out so much around the map.
Right, they're the best line of defense that he has, but eventually he could pick all 17 of them up and go across the map. Still a very scary force that can overwhelm even the sieged up tanks, Liberators, Ghosts. Not something you want to do, but it can happen. Because Maru really has set up quite the defense. Every time he loses bio on the front lines, think, oh, was that a good enough trade? Well, the bio is replaceable. The tanks, not as much. The ghost, definitely not. The tanks do go down here first and foremost, but all those ghosts are still alive, getting some snipes off. Nothing actually stopped them so much. So a couple lurkers, I think, also fell, but 15 SCVs. Command center is pushed off, and we have a bit of a stalemate as no one really wants to push into each other.
Yeah, you have to be super careful, right? If you're the Zerg and you unburrow, you get sniped. Oh, doesn't have the detection up front. The Ghost using the cloak to get those snipes off. Like we were saying, if the lurker starts the attack animation as the snipe begins, then you can pretty much always cancel it. So you either need something to distract the Zerg, or you push the Overseers away. Zergs don't have that point-and-click detection like the scan. The Overseer needs to physically be there, or you're going to lose units. So actually, nice little heads-up move there by Maru, utilizing the Ghost Cloak and having the situational awareness to say, okay, Overseer's pulling back. Overseer's not in that sieged-up mode where it has more vision. I can go in and snipe some units.
Yeah, very technical armies for both parties, absolutely. Talking about 14 lurkers having died, 12 tanks, yes, but actually no ghosts. No ghosts have died so far, so very good retention there for Maru, as we are going to be talking mostly about that dynamic.
Well, I have heard Nova say, so I believe it's canon. You can't kill a ghost, Zombie Grub. Okay, I think
as she dies.
That's against the law. All right, that's what.
Isn't that what she says? As she dies.
I'll have to do some of my own research later on that one.
All right. Well, we've got some more upgrades for Lings on the way, just more and more powerful run-by potentials as we start to spread this map out. I talked a little bit about this in a previous series, but Curious Minds might be a decently large map left to right, and it seems like there's a lot of open space. A lot of the open space has taken away the opportunities of other maps, might have put bases, actually. So we're talking about a situation where it gets split map very quickly. The corner bases become extremely important very quickly as well. Usually more of an onus on the Zerg player to get as many bases as possible, as are the ones that, again, they're going to have more resources lost in any given game. This one definitely also a similar situation. So something to pay attention to as we head into 20.5 minutes for this TVZ with no victory in sight. I think it actually is going to be a lot about who has the bases still up and running, who has taken as many minerals as possible.
The war of attrition continues, and I do still find it fascinating. Was a Spire ever built in this game? Because we do have coming in now, no Spires at all. We do have the Fusion Core being produced. There is still only one starport to the best of my knowledge, but I am expecting down the line ranged Liberators become a factor, and just Vipers alone to deal with those when you have Ghosts with EMP and Snipe. That gets a little bit tricky. I'm not expecting anything insane like a Battlecruiser switch, but then again, if you had all the upgrades for it, that would be horrifying if you didn't even have the option to build Corruptors. There is the Spire finally booting up as that +1 vehicle plating completes.
Any type of mass transition is going to be really difficult for Maru. He doesn't have the minerals and gas now, that's for sure, but then even if he did manage to get another base, it is only one other base. We're not talking about a mass expansion where he takes half bases and gold bases and all that good stuff. Nope, not on Curious Minds. So it's going to be after what he has right here now. He does at least take that top right, kind of what is due to him. We're supposed to each have one corner base, please and thank you. But Dark doesn't really want to let that happen. Dark's already accrued quite a bank, though. He is in a fairly comfortable position, assuming that he doesn't let Maru get too close to his tech structures. This could be actually one of those opportunities, though. A little bit of a base trade. Base is going to be going down for both parties. Lots of extra orbitals are a bit vulnerable. Mass Ghost coming back, however, to help defend. I mean that only one orbital might actually fall, maybe not even if it gets repaired, whereas Maru was able to pick up a hatchery.
This was the other big thing. Without any air units, the Vikings can actually kill the Overseers too, and that's very, very important to keep in mind. If the detection isn't there, the Ghosts can just kill everything. He's got a lot of them. They have a ton of energy, at least from what I was able to see from that last fight. I think he's kind of asking himself about the air units because 3 Thors are being made, and I'm gonna be frank with you, if there's no Broodlords on the map or Mutas, they're pretty useless. So if you're not using them to try to soak Banelings, it's mostly Lurkers. Lurkers top deck and wreck those. But we just got a message about what we wanted for dinner, Zombie Grub, and all I'm gonna tell you is that I want to reply to that text right now and say, can I get some nukes? All right, that's what I need next. I would like some big fat nukes. Little barbecue sauce on the side, and possibly some drones on top.
There's at least one. He already researched it. We saw that as well in his Showtime series, and he used it and then quickly canceled it. So I don't know if it's going to be truly impactful, but I love to see it. Lurkers jumping on top of tanks. Dark did make 24 Lurkers, so he's got some to throw around a little bit. and these Liberators that's supposed to kind of cover each other weren't actually available. That is a mass amount of Overseers. He is not getting blindsided.
He heard me talking about the Vikings killing his only one, and he said, I have a solution to this problem. And that planetary gets popped, like you were saying. The Lings on the counterattack. This is where they become the most dangerous. If you don't have your eyes on this, the fusion core is destroyed, so no advanced ballistics. Liberators are off the table. And 19 SCVs die, but, well, workers at this point, when you have this many orbital commands for Terran, not the most important things.
Yeah, that's very true. It is becoming a bit worrying, though, as Dark continues to accrue quite a bank, and Maru is starting to lose control of some of these bases. At least top right still locked down, good to go. I really don't think we'll be lacking detection anytime soon, but there is a world where all those do get, you know, moved over something.
I've got more Marines than you.
He has more Overseers than he has Overlords. I don't know how often I've seen that. It's a lot. 14 Overseers, 18 Lurkers. I mean, that is his plan, is to win with Lurkers or not win at all, I suppose. He did actually make a couple of Corruptors, but only to help against the potentially growing number of Liberators, who don't actually have their range, by the way. That was denied by the Ling, run by into the natural, so it's going to help a little bit here as Dark does take the at least initial step forward in the engagement, but realizes it's a little bit too much behind it.
Yeah, it's so difficult to try and move around these guys. The Vipers are the answer now with the Corruptors that have been added for helping to deal with those, but as you can see, Overseer isn't sieged. They're not towards the front, so he's actually able to get a couple of snipes, landing EMPs onto the Vipers, and I guess denying some potential changelings down the line too. At this point, if you can trade energy for units, now that we're talking about running out of money, you always want to take that opportunity. And he actually did shave off a tremendous amount of the air support for these Lurkers. So the Liberators are going to be able to move up now. That base will be denied once again. And Maru's spending what little pennies he has on getting more ghosts.
He still only has lost one ghost, Nate. That's really impressive. 34 Lurkers, but one ghost has died. Even these ones coming back to help defend. Realize they'd be a bit suicidal, so they come back with the rest of the army and let the Liberators do really most of the work. It's kind of a crazy game. Certainly the banks are getting a little bit low for both players. There's Dark actually using it to build 13 Corruptors. That's all of his bank. And he's not mining off of a whole lot anymore, by the way. 26 minutes in, first 4 bases are going to be mined out for the most part. So that leaves Dark with the bottom left and I guess a rebuilding base at 12 o'clock. It's not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the Liberators are becoming a problem. He never rebuilt the fusion core and got advanced ballistics, did he? So they're not as powerful as they otherwise could be, but they are enough of an issue that it's really, really difficult. And getting this many Corruptors is really interesting because we're talking about the bank being gone. Yes, the Corruptors are good against the Liberators, but they won't help against this rest of this army because we don't have those air upgrades. We don't have... I think we still don't have the Greater Spire itself, so Broodlords are off the table even if he does win air control in this game.
Yeah, no, and even if he did, even if he had the Greater Spire, he used all of it just building the Corruptors in the first place. That is a lot of resources invested into it. He is going to find a bit of a weak point through the middle, but here comes the Liberator Ghost Army Overseers. Not sure exactly what their plan is, and there's that nuke. We've been waiting on it. Certainly, Dark has to realize the nuke is on the way, right? He's got to realize. All right, he's going to pull it away. Maru might just go ahead and let that one go. Yeah, it just cancels it, actually. But, ooh, this is creating kind of a bit of a problem here.
Production. Now, this is interesting because this is a little bit exposed on some of the Overseers there as they continue to get shaved off with those Vipers. But how many... I don't know.
That's a lot of Lurkers still.
This is a very awkward position to take, moving up a ramp to save your own production, but you can't. You really can't afford to let them get on top of all the production.
Yeah, and a lot of these ghosts they're trying to produce on the high ground are just being rallied into their death. All the ones on the low ground coming in here, trying to follow the trail of Lurkers. A couple left behind, mostly I think more like buying time. Dark is just trying to do maximum amount of damage with the position that he also has put himself in, right? It sounds all fine and dandy to get the high ground against your opponent, get on top of Terran production, and it is the dandiest place to be. But against snipes, it's actually like, you know, if you don't really have something to back it up, a plan beyond it, it can be very risky. And I'm not sure it was a risk worth taking for Dark as he comes out of that with no gas bank and down 30 supply.
Yeah, this was my fear, Zombie Grub. I don't know how many Corruptors are still left, but they're not really able to do anything against this type of army. He didn't give himself much of a way out here. Maru is going to take game number 2. It's so scary when those lurkers push the way up the ramp, but if he doesn't have the money to rebuild all of that and be like, ha, now there's another army, then you just lost all of your lurkers. So.
Yeah. What he really needed was a fungal, right there was they tried to come up, and then the lurkers might have been able to find a lot of success. But I got to say, again, I've been harping on it, but I think he lost only 2 ghosts by the end of that game. It's
that's
crazy.
What does it. That's what does it. If it's crazy to think about it like that, because if he loses 2 ghosts in each of those fights, then you're like, well, he doesn't have any money. He doesn't have any of the Liberators probably, or the extra Vikings, or those 3 Thors, which felt a little bit awkward. But I guess he did eventually shave out all of the air support units. He was able to get the Vipers. He was able to land those EMPs. Really, really good ghost control.
Yeah. It really was so amazing. If you go back and look at some of those engagements, it might not have been the highlight of it because we didn't even really discuss it. But the way that he was always pulling back the ghosts, they'd be his initial response. He'd be like, oh, ghost, wait, hold on a second. Maybe I'm wrong here. And he'd bring forward his tanks and his Liberators and ensure that they're victorious. You're right. Like, he could have had less of everything on an already we were talking about the economies, the fact that it's could come down to who has a bigger bank. Had he lost 2 ghosts every single engagement, there's 15 engagements in this game, guys.
Yeah.
And he has 4 ghosts when the lurkers get into his natural. Oh, then Dark might have actually won there. And we're, hyping it up and it's 1-1, super, super cool. But instead, he kind of took it calmly, said, all right, yeah, that kind of sucks, but I'll handle it. And that was, again, just a point in Maru's favor as far as his patience shown throughout this season finals.
Yeah, he does a really good job. If you look at the way he moves the ghosts around, he doesn't try to just bring them all in a line. He recognizes that the only way that the snipes will ever finish the channel and kill the lurkers is if it's like, okay, if they all try to snipe and the lurkers hit maybe half of them, landing half of the other half of the snipes will kill all of the lurkers, and you're going to be fine. He made a lot of really good moves, just flattening it out like a pancake before he fought rather than letting the ghosts be bunched up, and I guess that's probably why they didn't die either.
Yeah, certainly a lot of them got injured, but ghosts in a way can be tanky, so the medevacs eventually came around.
They got twice as much health as a Marine. They don't take bonus damage from anything. They're pretty good.
And they get healed up, so I think that was another truly amazing game from Maru, I suppose, and we are usually looking at him to prove what Terran can do. I mean, there was a point there, and I forget when exactly it was, to be fair, but there was a point where Maru did take not the Roach attack, that was not the greatest start for Maru, but that was okay. No, there's another point where the lurkers did do a lot of damage, and I just looked at it, I remember thinking, yeah, other Terrans would be mentally defeated at this point. They'd be like, oh, the Lings got in, and that was really annoying. I had to pull back all the way. All the bases are starting to run out.
Fusion core.
Yeah, exactly. And instead, Maru just, it's hard to tell what he's thinking with his webcam. But he was totally fine. He said, I guess eventually I'll win this out. My army is still pretty good.
He decided to just play like Maru's.
Exactly. It's weird how he can do that. The rest of us can't. All right, Game 3 on Glittering Ashes. In the bottom left on his last life, we have Dark.
And his opponent in the northeast up 2-0 and looking as good as he ever has. The Red Terran player, he is Maru.
I would agree. He's looking as good as we would expect and a little bit more on top of that. Last season, Dark came in for his first season finals was last season. And we thought he was going to do a great job against Trap, I believe. And instead, he got 0-3. That was kind of a famous gift now. He punches his desk a little bit. He was really frustrated by it. Because I think he actually, he was expecting the win. But here, I'm not sure what Dark was thinking coming into it. I had pointed out that they had very even scores in the past. But Maru seems to be playing at 100%, where Dark maybe 80, 70, not as impressive as we've seen Dark in the past. Obviously still very good, and that last game was awesome all around.
Yeah.
But it's just, Dark's not able to really find that kill move.
It feels impossible sometimes. I felt the same way when we were casting Maru Showtime Game 2, where he's complete. He will try to attack. Like Maru, I would not describe him as a passive player. I think particularly maybe he showed a little too much respect to Cyril in their series. I don't know what it was there, but he was attacking nonstop. Eventually, the counter came, the bunch of Ravagers and all that. But he is very good at making choices in those very stressful situations, keeping his cool, like you were saying, the kinds of things that would, potentially like mentally shatter you. It's like, oh, I lost all my SCVs at my third. My third is lifted up. I know the Zerg's on 4 bases. Like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Maru's like, no, I'm okay. He keeps it together. He keeps his head on straight. And that's the only reason I think you pick up a dub like that, because there were a couple of moments where all he has to do is just say, all right, I'll just take this fight, whatever. And then Dark piles down everything, eradicates him, and we're in that 1-1 like you were talking about, saying, damn, we got a series on our hands. Maru, he is not interested in giving us the fairy tale story of a 5-game series, Zombie Grub. He's here to win.
Apparently. Because I will say, one criticism of the past Maru is that he used to, well, first of all, he didn't really care so much about online tournaments. We very rarely saw him, but that was back when we had a choice. We don't have a choice now. But even when there was the attempts of doing offline, or he really wanted to do well online, there'd be games where he would just 2 racks 3 times in a row, and all these community casters back in 2015, like poor Zombie Grub here, would be like, Maru game, awesome, amazing.
I get to cast Maru.
2 racks 3 times in a row. He loses 0-3, and you're like, yeah, that was awesome. That feels like he's come such a long way, where everything it feels really nice. It feels important to him, and he's either making it look easy, or when it's not easy, he's showing a lot of heart, like I'm thinking the Maru Showtime game.
Yeah, it's been a wild couple of years for everybody, I think it's fair to say. But when we get to see the best players go up against each other, and, absolutely no shade intended by this at all, but both being in the same region, getting that minimal latency to really do everything that they can to take it to each other, we just get some really good StarCraft, really high-quality games. And this series is I believe the medical term, Zombie Grub, is nerd chills, is what I'm getting.
I would really love for Dark to actually play outside of Roaches, by the way. I think that is the most nerd chills you can ever get. Tasteless! Is that if you see Ling Baneling versus Bio, and that might be what we have here on Glittering Ashes. I mentioned that Dark's probably going to play Ling at least once in this series, and hopefully twice, because hopefully there's another game here. But I'm thinking back to him versus Time. Some epic Ling Baneling mass Muta he brought back, I suppose. Not really popular nowadays. Makes me really excited for what this game could hold, because Glittering Ashes is also a fairly large map. Means that maybe you do have some time not to just get to Mutas, but then actually abuse them, keep the Terran on the back foot, but not nearly as dedicated in that as a Roach push is. Roaches are very dedicated.
Yeah, it's probably also fair to point out, not only is Glittering Ashes a huge map, but you don't have the 300 or I don't know, some math nerd will get mad. The 300-degree angle where you can bring all the roaches around. I won't say 360, but you have a huge amount of space to attack the third on that last map. But here, it's a little bit more cut off. It's a little bit more in the realm of what you typically expect from the 3-base layout. So I'm all with you. I love this. We're getting the melee upgrades. Let's see a little Ling Bane action. Maybe even some Mutt-Mutts. Who knows?
Really fast armory. It was like, where are there Hellions on the way? No. Really fast armory going potentially in some Widowmine drops afterwards, who has shown some of this in previous tournaments. That can be very annoying to deal with. But right now, all Dark needs, the handful of Lings, Queen's a good position, and the actual 2 Medivacs themselves will not be doing a lot of damage. But Maru, I think, is more so having to do, actually, this is a pretty good cleanup on creep tumors, but more so needs to identify, those are speedlings. Those are legitimately speedlings. All right, it's Ling Baneling, and then what else beyond that?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The lack of the engineering base going does make me a little nervous. It's a very weird thing to not see. But going for the armory this early for the Widowmines, especially since it is actually going to be Ling Bane, I do love to see that. The second factory, super fast as well. And it's like, okay, I'll build a couple of tanks. Obviously, I need a tech lab to get drilling claws, and we've seen some nasty speed mine drops. Or I think even Sterile, again, going back to him yesterday, was like, well, you always take some damage from them.
Right, yeah. And I like the additional couple of tanks before going all into Widowmines as well. I think there's also potential that Dark could try and hide a Roach build behind a facade, if you will, of Queen Ling, but I think eventually we'll just go all Widowmines. And there's one already affecting engagement a little bit there. 11 kills on that one.
You gotta have that overseer a little bit earlier. You need to have that detection on the table. Otherwise, those mines, well, they can be game-winning, especially against the Ling Bane. and Baneling speed halfway done. But, I mean, look at this. The 1-1 for Maru is only just now starting. 2-2 is on the way for Dark. And this is like he has to stay on the map and avoid an actual game-deciding type fight. He does not want to take a big head-to-head where these Lings can get us surrounded, utilize that double upgrade advantage that they have at the moment, because they're going to be so much more difficult to kill. Forget the Lings even killing the Marines. Just tanking for the Banes will be a lot easier.
This is a crazy upgrade difference. You have full 2 upgrades ahead for the Zerg player. Maybe half. They have seen that all the time, but that is big.
Well, the mines are supposed to make up for it, so we'll see. We'll see if that ends up being the case.
He's still adding on a couple of tanks here and there. I think they are great to help out a bit defensively. And eventually, during a big push, whenever that does happen, a couple can anchor your engagement a bit more. 8 SCVs do go down to the Banelings, as I think Dark realized that was a bit of an opportunity there. But Dark did not go into Aspire, and he's not even really quick into Hydras. I think eventually we might see them for Lurkers, but it's right into that Hive. Infestation Pit's going to be finished up. He's still putting on some aggression. He's going to see this Widow Mine drop. I'm going to assume he knows the Widow Mine drop. If he actually saw it, he sees this one, deals with it super easily.
I almost wonder if you try to mine drop onto those lane Banes, since he has drilling claws, the ones outside of his base.
Whoa.
If Maru gets forced to be on the defensive, that upgrade advantage we're talking about, it is going to be a very tight window where it's 1-1 on both for a little bit. That tank actually does a really good job of drawing a lot of the fire into the choke, but that third cannot be held. And this is exactly what we were talking about. He's just overwhelming him and forcing that defensive play, which is just so much more difficult to do when that upgrade advantage isn't on your hands. The 1-1 is done now, but the 2-2 is about to finish, and he's lost 38 SCVs, Zombie Grub.
That's it. That is it. Maru doesn't have anything back at home. These Widow Mines could drop out and then kill. Not enough, I would assume. Dark has pushed Maru all the way back into his home, so even if this isn't enough to say GG for Maru, it is such a loss of momentum. He's still behind in those upgrades. He does at least remember to start up +2 attack. Dark is on his way to a Hive. He's got Burrow on the way, and Maru says, you know what? Not worth playing this one out. We are going to go to a game 4, but at least Maru is still in that powerful position up 2-1.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, I mean, the idea behind the build seems cool. It's like, okay, I got a quick armory, I'm going to get fast drilling claws, but starting the second factory before the engineering base, it had to have been a mistake. Like, I don't want to believe that he intended to do that just because it turned into such a problem for him that he couldn't take those head-to-head fights. We're going to go to a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. When we return, the conclusion of Maru versus Dark.
Welcome back. We're getting into game 4 of this series. Beautiful Terran versus Zerg. Dark versus Maru is, I would say, delivering so far, right? Dark finally showing some life, getting a point on the board with some nice Ling pressure. Massively ahead in those upgrades. We were talking about that before we threw to the break. Very different game from the first two. That was all roaches.
Yeah, I mean, between you and me, I've never been exactly crazy about the oops all roaches strategy, and I love that in this game we got to see Dark play an upgrade heavy, mass Ling Bane, being all over the map, defending, attacking simultaneously, and even with a couple of cheeky things like the fast cloaked mines, you think, okay, these are supposed to be really good against the Ling Bane, but when you're busy throwing all of them at your opponent and you don't actually have anything to defend, when you don't build a bulwark at your third base and you're like, okay, I'm just going to keep the Zerg at home, it's hard to do that when you're down 2 full upgrades.
Yes, it is. I think this was kind of funny in 2 ways. One, it did remind me of those times where the 2-on-1 was 100% figured out, and it just really was failing for anyone who was trying to still do it. They got overwhelmed. But then 2, it was making me remember some of like those Cura builds where he was trying out the fast Widow mines. And the idea is, you know, if it does work out, you can apply so much pressure that the Zerg player who even goes, oh wait, I should apply some pressure back. It's when they do that they get mind dropped, and then it just kind of goes in a bunch of chaos, right? But what we saw was just the absolute perfect timing and response from Dark that made the build look really silly. It made Maru's situation look silly, and I don't think that's because Maru was, you know, a bad player, decided that he was going to play worse than the previous 2 games. But it
he
was
just
Dark
consciously chose, he's like, you know what? I know I took these 20-kilogram wristbands off, but maybe I'll just put them back on for no reason, right?
Yeah.
Why not? I don't think that's the case. And speaking of oops all roaches, we are here on Blackburn for game number 4. In the bottom right, we have the red Terran player representing Team Envy. He is Maru.
Couple cheeky SCVs. The bottom left, getting 1 map. Can he get another? We have the Zerg player, Dark.
Gotta love imagining that. It's like, oh, I've almost defeated Cell. Actually, let me put the weights back on just in case I beat you too easily.
Literally Vegeta.
Wouldn't be fair.
Go ahead and eat Android 18. I don't mind.
It's not like it's the fate of my family and planet on the line.
Oh,
and the Insta Scout too. Gotta be sour boot that one.
The ideal here for Dark is that Maru didn't even see him scout it, so Maru thinks, oh, I'm gonna get away with this, and nope,
but bring the drones out. Shut this down, or at least try.
I mean, should be. Well, there's a little bit of RNG right now.
Yeah, it's literally just about what the computer gives us where those SCVs go. One barracks does finish, and the lobsters are able to push the other one from doing so.
I thought the barracks was actually right up against the wall, but the drones
I did not think that the drones could get to that corner either.
Yeah,
but then again, I would be real with you. 2 racks is probably the least done strategy I've ever done in my life. So
really. You know what?
Never been a fan of it.
I believe it. Before I became a 100% certified cheeser, I also rarely ever 2 racks.
My favorite way to lose games is rushing a battle cruiser and having 7 Ravagers pile down the bunker with 4 Marines at the front.
If I'm going to lose a game, it's going to be with battle cruisers.
That's
the
right.
honorable way.
That's right. They say it's a whole city, right? So everyone can be evacuated. Kind of how I think about it lore-wise anyway.
Nice. Well, Maru is not unfamiliar with this situation as someone who 2 racks is a lot. Not his only good strength, right? But he does it a lot. You're going to have a couple of failures. You're going to have a couple of times where they're going to find you too quickly and they're going to cancel hopefully only one of your barracks. If they cancel both when they're 80%, then you're even Maru's in trouble.
Yeah, you're in pretty deep there. And one of the things I really like about this, after the drone pullback, he did leave one by the 3rd base. Our wonderful observer, Nyal, who I did finally get to meet yesterday. Super based individual, keeping us up to date on where things are going. Gets that 3rd base, can't deny it. So a nice little dub for Dark to pick up, and Maru does the ultimate Terran power move after you fail with an early attack, and that's go straight to 3 command centers.
I mean, there's 2 things here. One, I really feel like even the more aggressive Zerg players, a lot of the Korean Zerg players, aren't really eager to throw away their chances in a macro game after this opener to a dedicated push to punish it. And 2, even if they did, I think that Maru is, he's going to be very much on the ball scouting for something like that. and would actually be able to finagle his way out of it. So I absolutely prefer this follow-up to a failed 2-rack, so ever it did fail, over the Hellion drop we saw earlier in the season finals, or like a Hellbat push, which is questionable even in best of games.
No.
So I think this is where we usually say that Maru is amazing when it comes to finding out ways to play after a 2-rack. So why he was one of those guys that we said, oh, the 2-racks is no longer all in, super cheese. You just kind of say, oh, that happened, and then you move on with your life.
I think it's one of those things that, especially versus Zerg, is just such a common thing because, let's be real. If you're a Zerg player, there's not a whole lot of good 1.5 or 2 base all-ins you can try to do to kill a Terran. Even if you know they're going 3 command centers, there's a reason why you see it that much. And it's because it's very hard to punish, so don't mind that at all, especially off the back of the field attack. And like you said, if both barracks get canceled, then maybe it's a different conversation because he can't get a factory up, but that is not the case today. Viking is going to come out to push some overlords away. We are going to get Hellions built, though, as 6 and 7, up to 7 roaches now, being produced by Dark.
That Reaper gets out alive, but did it get enough scouting is more of the question. Did not get to the front of the natural. That's where the Roach Warren is. And Dark has done this for a little while, I think. He's built a Roach Warren fast enough to do a little bit of early aggression, but then late enough that even if he doesn't choose to be aggressive, it's okay. Didn't really end up his build that much. So building, 8 roaches. He could send those across the map. Hellion's going to bypass it, and there's not much they could do back home anyways. They're going to choose to try and just buy some time, which means Dark does not get on the other side of the map and might completely abandon that plan. Because the chances of a Banshee being on the way, I feel like is too strong, but then I know the Banshee's on the way, so I get that going for me.
Very true. And, the roaches offensively won't be very useful until that 3rd base does get taken. However, Maru is going to land it immediately and will primarily have to rely on that Banshee for the defense, as the bunker itself is not even done. Having the wall here is still pretty good, though, because it's mostly just about buying time. You could land the Viking, which can outrange the roaches from the other side, too. The Hellions can actually poke since they also outrange, and I think your best case scenario if you're Dark is kill the bunker and try to focus down whatever you can. If you killed this Viking, that would actually be pretty awesome for him. There's the lift up, and I guess take a couple of SCVs on the way out, get a couple exit frags, and get that worker count difference up a bit more.
Yeah, 2 big things, right? The Banshee didn't find the roaches until they were right on his doorstep, so that's big. And then the bunker wasn't done. But if both of those things weren't true, if the bunker was done or the Banshee finds it a bit sooner, then those roaches look even a bit bad. It's not that big of a committal, but still. But no, getting in there, getting the cancels, causing chaos, 6 SCVs. I think Dark has to be happy with it. It's the only thing he was going to get from it. And now we get to see him move on to, yes, Roach speed, but then also everything, apparently. Okay. I was going to say Ling speed.
Everything.
Everything. Ling speed, Hydrolistent, Infestation Pit. Everything is coming down, but...
Except for the upgrades, right?
Yeah, the Evolution Chambers did get started. They finished, actually, but is he going to dedicate to them? Is he going to use everything on his Hive?
It's like you have to make that choice, and there it is. Okay, so +1 missile attack.
Both.
It's worth bringing up on this map. We especially, when we talk about Maru and roaches, we've memed on Blackburn quite a bit because of that triangle base where if you break the rocks open, you can get a really wide angle, similarly to map number 2 of this series. However, since he's taken the one on the right side, it's a little bit safer. You don't quite have that easy direct path towards it. There are a few choke points, and that high ground spot is maybe the only area of concern, but I actually love that the Banshee's kind of been patrolling over there for a little while, just so it's not super easy for Dark to go for that kind of counterattack, because otherwise all he can do is run to the natural from that bottom part. He doesn't have that front base to try and dive on top of. So he's going to take his gold and be happy with it, go straight up to the Hive, and 1-1 will finish for Maru. And I think, we're headed towards that macro game, Zombie Grub.
I really like it for Dark, though. Probably knowing that a push wasn't going to be impossible to hold on if he had to pivot and actually build a lot of units. But then also knowing that just by building roaches is already threatening to a Terran player, I could do an attack. I could be the one pushing into you. You need to play a little bit safe, a little defensive. Eventually, Maru actually right now is going to say, oh, it's not an attack, it's Hive, it's Fungals. Okay, then.
Whoa, guess one of the infestors gets two infestors with the drop and gets out. I think just one Marine getting picked off there. Very nice grab. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I can't believe you got both of the infestors.
Nah, I think Dark. He was pretty upset about it. But that's still also a very great scout. Maru's going to now apply that pressure, realizing that how greedy Dark was trying to be should be punished in some way, especially when you have this map that has that gold base, a bit vulnerable to a tank push such as this. I mean, this is going to be difficult for Dark, especially without those fungals to buy time, ward away the big bio ball.
Yeah, that's like the whole, I mean, that's like the staple. That's what holds all of it together, is being able to threaten the fungal if you dive onto the Ravagers. And let's face it, there's also not a lot of the Ravagers. So as the tank siege up here, the only real move you have is try to take a different base or just yeet everything onto the army. And we see, based on the positioning that Maru has, he would lose a lot in doing so. The tanks are going to start to move a little bit more, and with this much bio, this is just a really awful spot to be in. Losing those infestors, as we can see now, incredibly painful.
One fungal buys a couple seconds, second fungal buys a couple seconds, more corrosive bios buy a couple more, and then maybe you can actually save this gold base. But Maru choosing the exact right time to push out once he realized what was really happening, also pushes out while Dark is still finding a lot of things very expensive. He's not yet built the Humongous Bank, so every time he makes a Lurker or a Viper, it's quite a bit. And it's not even that many in quantity. It's all about quality for Dark when it comes to those very expensive units. And maybe it was enough for now, but he's going to want to build more. He wants more Lurkers. He wants to be actually on the offensive, and that just wasn't able to happen up until now. Maru knows that was getting a bit too scary, so he pulls back.
I like the Nidus network. Like to see that. A couple of Hellbats is going to die on that random cliff. But he did go for, I believe he got the Adaptive Talons first. He has the range upgrade at a very nice time. This is not at all like the previous scenario where we already had Ghosts out before the range upgrade was done. So Maru's going to be the one a little bit more on the tech catch-up sort of situation. And that does scare me a little bit while this army is out on the map and he approaches maximum supply. Because if units aren't coming out inside his base and there's a Nidus Worm building in there, he's going to need to be rushing back to try and save his production. I do believe there's an Overseer going across the very bottom of the map. Thank you, Nyal. And we are going to be seeing that worm begin. But you know what? Never mind, Zombie Grub, because apparently Maru just has 3 eyes in the back of his head.
He knows, man. I mean, this is more of a dive towards that late game, and this was not that fantastic, but it might be okay. But this one is going to dive on top of the Hive. Much more important to talk about. The Hive does get taken down. And that is prior to a lot of important things being out. I mean, 3-3 is not done. If he loses any of those Vipers, it may take a while before he can replace them. He is starting to get a handle on things, but the Lurker is also eventually getting pushed back. Maru can be pretty happy with how he's handled this so far, and yeah, no Nidus Worm to bother him either.
Yeah, having the bio already pre-placed there, really, I mean, I think you said it at the very start of this, Zombie Grub, but this is what happens when you get to see 2 players who know each other very well going at it. Just recognizing, okay, the Nidus is definitely still on the table. He was pre-prepared for it, saves himself a world of hurt because of that, and now is able to continue to do the harass. But it's a dance on both sides. The Lurkers offensively have been great, picked off a tremendous amount of workers of that gold, and Dark's trying to move in towards that natural, but we have a lot of tanks. Most of them not sieged, however. But these Ghosts can also pick off a couple of these units with that snipe. 5 Ghosts being made at a time, so Maru has also made it back to that late game army. And this is where I get a little bit nervous because he looked so damn good in that second map once he reached this army composition.
Yes, he did. Again, different map, so it's not necessarily about how many open spaces there are or pathways or rather chokes. It is about the amount of pathways. There's really not a whole lot. You have the middle, you have the bottom, you have the top, but if you choose middle, if you choose top or bottom on this map as an attack path, then the other guy chooses the other one, right? And it can create kind of a weird base for base scenario. If you both just meet in the middle, then there's plateaus to consider, there's chokes to consider, a bit awkward, but it's a very different map than what we saw Maru play out on. Also, maybe even more split map where you really do have your side of the map and that guy has theirs. But it's going to be another chance for Dark to actually take a game, I would say, even though it looks so promising for Maru to even get a 3-0 with the momentum that he had. Dark is getting a little back. He opened this up, denying a 2 racks. He's still got to feel confident enough to be able to take this series, but yeah, reaching this point, knowing how it last went, I'm sure Dark's remembering.
And perhaps something we may have overlooked a little bit, Maru's 3-3 is coming in. That +3 attack will be done soon, but because the Hive was killed, it's only just now finished.
Yeah.
Dark was never able to invest in those the latest tier of those upgrades. Thankfully, he got all the upgrades needed for the Lurkers, but now coming over again, we see the Vipers getting some solid abducts onto the tanks. The gold base still under a tremendous amount of pressure, and will need to land some good snipes if he wants to keep these Lurkers off his back.
Does again have a lot of ghosts.
And that Banshee, by the way, all game long. The
Yeah.
safety Banshee. Well, safety matters even 15 minutes into the game, Zombie Grub.
Apparently. This is quite awkward for Dark, but it is, I guess, all on Maru's side of the map. So
when the starting Banshee kills 4 Lurkers.
I was very surprised by how long he stayed, but then I looked at the supply and I was like, I guess it's not the biggest steal. It's okay then. But now he's going to try Nidus Swarm off in the corner. It looks like Maru is just a little too good. Going to be able to clean that one up. I think more so Dark's going to consider giving himself a nice base in this game, which will include upgrades. He has yet to start at 3-3, although he has the cash, although he has the Hive. Something they just might not be thinking of is he tries to rebuild his Lurkers, tries to get more aggression onto Maru's side of the map. He is forgetting something that is still pretty darn useful.
Yeah, and he's trying to pull the attention away with the worms. It's not just about landing it and being able to unload a huge army inside the production area. It's about pulling supply away, distracting the opponent, and creating opportunities, buying time, creating space to move the rest of the Lurkers around as they reach this high-ground point. And if there is a moment where that worm finishes and all these units can spill out, it could turn into hell in a handbasket real quick for the Terran.
Probably not worth it. I'm not even sure he had a whole lot in that Nidus Worm, but that is the scary thing, right? Then another 5 seconds for Maru not responding, and then Dark does spill out with 10 Lurkers all burrowed before he responds. That's the very scary thing for Terrans. That tank being sieged is not enough. He sees it, but again, just a little bit later. Dark is going to have at least 2 attacks. Does he have anything again in the Nidus Worm? There we go. A couple of Lurkers pop out. Another Nidus Worm. Chaos in the main base.
And that's the horrifying part about it, like you said, Zombie Grove. You don't know what's inside. Is it just a weak commitment? Is it empty just to pull your attention away? Or are there Lurkers that are now going to force you to bring the majority of your army back inside of your main base, thus opening the door for that big attack on the northeast? Lurkers have shut down the gold base mining. Once again, he does save the top right planetary fortress. A big stop there. And losing 14 SCVs, still has 63 left. I think, I'll say the mule word again, but obviously he's burning a lot of the orbital energy on scans, and the tenaciousness of the endless Nidus Worms going into his base is pretty impressive. He refuses to stop trying with those.
So the resources lost, I guess, is fairly similar to the second game. I mean, it was a big resource loss difference then, too. Actually, this might be bigger, because I looked at the actual units lost, and it's 35 Lurkers have been killed already. And it feels like there really hasn't been that much of a Lurker stage in this game.
5
that
ghosts.
is very instant. This is very quick. That's that is why Dark is struggling to actually accrue a bank. He does again rebuild his army, but what looked a bit promising there with the Nidus Worm quickly turned against him. This is maybe an okay start to the engagement, but he's going to need a little bit more beyond that, even bringing Queens in to try and get some transfuses.
Yeah, one of those Lurkers up top, I was going to say, he just barely missed it with the scan, but as it burrows, it is picked off. And then you see those tanks, those Liberators all coming together, and man, Maru's done a really good job of recognizing, especially what he can do with those Liberators, because this is just, again, like that second game, Zombie Grub. No Spire, no Corruptors. If they come, I guess it'll be at the 30-minute mark, like in that game too. But here we go. Another Nidus Worm's going to come up towards the front side as the Lurkers burrow next to this orbital command. There are some tanks. He has the high ground as well. And are there overseers here, is what I was wondering. Are we going to see the Ghost's cloak?
There's none. There's literally no overseer out in the field, and I don't think Dark has recognized that either. That is a bigger issue than anything else in this game.
Is he going to make another 10 or 15
guess
at once?
He can't even afford it? You can afford maybe this time around, but this is perhaps even more Maru-sided, right? It feels like everything that's happened, Maru just continues getting out of it with supply and bank behind it too. Dark does finally finish up his 3-3, but I don't think it's going to really change the engagement that much.
No, this is where Maru starts to feel like he's tilting the scales a bit. Dark is relying on these Lurkers. He has a lot of them, but the Lurkers are not going to answer the Liberators. They can be good versus the tanks, but the rest of these units get ripped apart by the Ghosts and the Marines and the Marauders. There you go. Snipes landing across almost all of the Lurkers on the way back as they try to dive on top of this army, but they're so low that as they're chased, they'll get picked off, and Maru does it, closing this series out 3-1 with what can only be described as just high speed and fantastic micro.